Hi there. I'm Margaret and I'm 28 years old. As a wedding planner here in Nashville, I thought I knew everything about creating the perfect wedding day. But my own sister taught me the most valuable lesson I've ever learned about love, betrayal, and revenge. You see, I had planned what I believed would be the most beautiful day of my life, but it turned into something completely unexpected when my sister decided to steal both my wedding dress and my groom. I'll never forget sitting in that audience watching her walk down the aisle in my vintage lace dress, announcing to everyone that he was hers now. But here's the thing, I just sat there with the biggest smile on my face because I had a secret that would change everything. Before we dive into this wild story, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop your location in the comments below. And if you're ready for a tale of sisterly betrayal and the sweetest revenge you've ever heard, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last moment. Running my own wedding planning business in Nashville had always been my dream, and by 26, I had built something truly special. Music City Weddings had become one of the most sought-after planning services in Tennessee, and I loved every minute of creating magical moments for couples. My office downtown buzzed with excited brides-to-be vendor meetings and the constant hum of creating perfect days. It was during one of these perfect planning sessions that my entire world shifted. David walked into my office on a crisp October morning 2 years ago, looking slightly overwhelmed and completely out of his element. He needed help planning his sister Jennifer's wedding, and his broad shoulders seemed to carry the weight of family expectations. As a successful architect with his own firm, David understood design and structure, but wedding planning was entirely foreign territory. His dark hair was slightly messy from running his fingers through it, and when he smiled, something inside my chest fluttered in a way I hadn't experienced before. We spent hours that first day going through venues' color schemes and vendor options for Jennifer's spring wedding. David asked thoughtful questions and genuinely cared about creating something beautiful for his sister. Unlike other clients who treated me like hired help, he valued my expertise and made me feel like a creative partner. When we toured the historic Cheekwood estate that afternoon, walking through the botanical gardens as golden sunlight filtered through the trees, our conversation shifted from wedding details to our own dreams and aspirations. Our romance bloomed slowly and naturally over the following months. David would stop by my office with coffee from Frothy Monkey, my favorite local spot, and we'd spend lunch breaks walking along the Cumberland River. He'd tell me about his latest architectural projects, his eyes lighting up when he described designing spaces that would house families and create memories. I shared my passion for weddings, explaining how each celebration represented hope and new beginnings. David listened with genuine interest, asking about my clients and remembering details from previous conversations. The night we had our first kiss was during Jennifer's rehearsal dinner at the Hermitage Hotel. We had stepped outside onto the terrace for some fresh air after a successful evening of coordination. David looked at me with such warmth and said, "Maggie, I don't know how I got so lucky to find someone who brings such joy to everything she touches." When his lips met mine under the Nashville skyline, I knew this was different from any relationship I'd ever experienced. David was genuine in ways that surprised me. He called when he said he would show up early for our dates and remembered small details like my love for old movies and my grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe. He never played games or kept me guessing about his feelings. After dating men who treated relationships like casual entertainment, David's consistency felt like coming home. He met my family during Thanksgiving that first year, charming my parents with his polite manners and obvious devotion to me. My sister Rebecca was living in Los Angeles, then pursuing her acting dreams with the determination she'd shown since childhood. Rebecca had always been the dramatic one in our family, 3 years younger, but infinitely more comfortable being the center of attention. She'd been in LA for 4 years taking acting classes, working restaurant jobs, and going to auditions with relentless optimism. During holiday visits, she'd regale us with stories of near misses with casting directors and small roles in independent films that never quite materialized into bigger opportunities. Rebecca and I had a complicated relationship that most sisters probably understand. We loved each other fiercely, but there was always an undercurrent of competition that our mother Eleanor seemed to encourage without realizing it. Growing up, Rebecca was the creative, spontaneous daughter, while I was the responsible, organized one. Teachers loved me for my reliability, but everyone remembered Rebecca for her charisma and natural performance ability. She could walk into any room and immediately become the most interesting person there, while I preferred working behind the scenes to make other people shine. When David proposed to me last Christmas Eve at the Gaylord Opryland Resort, surrounded by their famous holiday lights display, Rebecca was genuinely happy for me during our FaceTime call. She cried tears of joy and demanded to see the ring from every angle, asking about wedding plans and timeline details. Her enthusiasm felt authentic, and I was touched that my little sister was so excited about my happiness. We spent hours on the phone over the following weeks, with Rebecca offering creative ideas for decorations and themes from her artistic perspective. Planning my own wedding became the project of a lifetime. 6 months felt like the perfect timeline to create something elegant but not rushed. I chose Belle Meade Plantation for its historic charm and sprawling grounds that would photograph beautifully. The venue's antebellum architecture and manicured gardens provided the perfect backdrop for a classic Southern wedding. I booked the date for the third Saturday in June, when Tennessee weather would be warm but not oppressively hot. Finding my dress was a journey that took 3 months of searching through boutiques across Nashville and Atlanta. When I discovered the vintage lace gown at White Magnolia Bridal downtown, I knew immediately it was meant for me. The dress had been created in 1965, featuring intricate hand-sewn lace, a fitted bodice, and a flowing train that moved like poetry. The previous owner's granddaughter was selling it after her own marriage ended, and something about the dress's history of love and loss felt meaningful. The ivory lace complemented my skin tone perfectly, and when I tried it on, even the boutique owner, Mrs. Henderson, teared up. Every detail of the wedding reflected careful thought and planning. I selected peonies and garden roses in soft pink and cream tones, created a menu featuring Southern classics with modern twists, and designed invitations with hand-lettered calligraphy. David and I chose a string quartet for the ceremony and a jazz band for the reception, creating musical moments that would flow seamlessly throughout the evening. We wrote our own vows, planned a signature cocktail called Music City Magic, and arranged for late-night food trucks to keep guests energized for dancing. My mother Eleanor was in her element, planning what she declared would be the social event of the season. As a prominent member of Nashville society, Mother had high expectations for how our family appeared to others. She invited her bridge club, country club friends, and various community leaders, expanding our guest list from 100 to nearly 200 people. Eleanor spent weeks coordinating with me on details, ensuring everything would photograph beautifully for the society pages. While her involvement sometimes felt overwhelming, I appreciated her excitement and support for this important milestone. 3 weeks before the wedding, Rebecca surprised me by announcing she was taking a break from acting to come home and help with final preparations. Her phone call came on a Tuesday evening while I was addressing the last batch of invitations in my apartment. "Maggie, I've been thinking, and I can't miss being part of your big day," she said, her voice bright with enthusiasm. "I've cleared my schedule and I'm flying home tomorrow to help with whatever you need. Sisters should be together for moments like this." My initial reaction was pure joy. Rebecca had missed so many family events over the years due to auditions, classes, and work commitments. Having her home for my wedding felt like the perfect way to strengthen our bond and create new memories together. I immediately started mentally reorganizing tasks she could help with, from final vendor confirmations to organizing the bridal party timeline. When I picked her up at Nashville International Airport Wednesday afternoon, she looked radiant and excited, hugging me tightly and gushing about how proud she was of everything I'd accomplished. However, within the first few days of her visit, I began noticing behavior that felt slightly off. Rebecca asked unusually detailed questions about every aspect of the wedding, from vendor contact information to timeline specifics. While I appreciated her interest, some questions seemed random and unnecessary. She wanted to know which vendors would be at the venue earliest, how the bridal suite was arranged, and exactly when different family members would arrive. When I asked why she needed such specific details, she laughed and said she wanted to help coordinate everything perfectly. Rebecca also began spending unexpected amounts of time with David. She'd suggest the three of us grab lunch, then monopolize the conversation with stories from Los Angeles and questions about his architectural work. During one dinner at the Southern Steak and Oyster, I watched her lean in close when David spoke, maintaining eye contact longer than felt comfortable. When I mentioned it later, David brushed off my concerns, saying Rebecca was just being friendly and showing interest in his career. The most unsettling incident happened during my final dress-fitting appointment. I had scheduled the fitting for Thursday afternoon, bringing Rebecca along because she'd begged to see the dress on me one more time. Mrs. Henderson led us to the spacious fitting room at White Magnolia Bridal, where my gown hung like a work of art waiting for its final adjustments. As I slipped into the dress, Rebecca's eyes never left the mirror, studying every detail with intense focus. After Mrs. Henderson finished marking the minor alterations needed, I stepped out of the dress and hung it carefully on its special padded hanger. While I was changing back into my street clothes behind the privacy screen, I heard rustling fabric. When I emerged, Rebecca was standing in front of the mirror wearing my wedding dress, spinning slowly and studying her reflection from every angle. "Rebecca, what are you doing?" I asked, shocked to see her in my gown without permission. She turned toward me with a dreamy expression, the lace train swirling around her feet. "I'm sorry, Maggie. I just wanted to know how it felt to wear something so beautiful. I've never tried on a real wedding dress before." She ran her hands over the bodice, smoothing the vintage lace. "It fits me perfectly, doesn't it? Like it was made for someone with my measurements." Mrs. Henderson looked uncomfortable, clearly unsure whether to intervene in what appeared to be a family matter. I felt a strange knot forming in my stomach as I watched Rebecca pose in my dress, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Please take it off carefully," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "The lace is delicate, and the alterations aren't finished yet." Rebecca seemed reluctant to remove the dress, taking several more moments to study herself in the mirror before finally stepping out of it. As she handed it back to me, she said, "You're so lucky, Maggie. This dress is absolutely magical. The woman who wears this will feel like a real princess on her wedding day." That evening over dinner at my parents' house, Rebecca made several comments that left me feeling uneasy. When David complimented the meal my mother had prepared, Rebecca laughed and said, "You know, some people are just naturally lucky in everything they do. They get the perfect career, the perfect man, the perfect life, while others have to fight for every little opportunity." The comment felt pointed, though she delivered it with a bright smile. Later, when David mentioned being excited about our honeymoon plans to Italy, Rebecca sighed wistfully and said, "True love is so rare and precious. I hope it finds everyone eventually, even if it comes in unexpected ways." She looked directly at David when she said this, holding his gaze longer than felt appropriate. David shifted uncomfortably and changed the subject, but I noticed him glancing at Rebecca throughout the rest of the evening. My mother Eleanor seemed to be giving Rebecca extra attention during her visit, which wasn't entirely unusual since Rebecca lived so far away. However, I began noticing them having whispered conversations that would stop abruptly when I entered rooms. During one afternoon when I came home early from vendor meetings, I found them sitting close together on the living room sofa, their heads bent toward each other in what appeared to be an intimate discussion. They quickly separated when they heard me and Eleanor immediately launched into chatter about flower arrangements. David's behavior also began shifting in subtle ways that made me question my intuition. He seemed distracted during our conversations, checking his phone more frequently, and sometimes failing to respond to questions immediately. When I asked about his day, his answers felt rehearsed and lacking the detail he usually shared. One evening he mentioned that Rebecca had been texting him about special wedding surprises. She wanted to coordinate, but when I asked for specifics, he became vague and said she wanted to keep things secret until the big day. The most troubling moment came during a family dinner 3 days before the wedding. My parents had invited David's family to join us for a casual barbecue in their backyard, creating an opportunity for both families to connect before the ceremony. The evening was pleasant with conversation flowing easily between relatives and David's parents, expressing their excitement about welcoming me into their family. As the sun began setting over the Nashville skyline, Rebecca stood and asked for everyone's attention. She raised her glass of wine and smiled broadly at the gathered families. "I want to make a toast to love," she announced, her voice carrying the dramatic flair she'd perfected through years of acting training. "True love is the most powerful force in the universe, and when it's real, it finds a way to flourish no matter what obstacles stand in its path." Everyone raised their glasses, expecting a sweet tribute to David and me. Instead, Rebecca continued, her eyes fixed directly on David. "Love doesn't always follow the path we expect it to take. Sometimes it surprises us, challenges us, and asks us to be brave enough to follow our hearts, even when it means making difficult choices. To true love, wherever it may lead." The toast felt strangely uncomfortable, though most family members seemed to interpret it as Rebecca being characteristically dramatic and romantic. David looked confused and slightly troubled, while I felt that same knot in my stomach growing tighter. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, I noticed Rebecca approach David by the garden shed, placing her hand on his arm while speaking in low, urgent tones. From a distance, I couldn't hear their conversation, but David's body language seemed tense and conflicted. 2 days before my wedding, my carefully planned world began crumbling in ways I never could have imagined. Thursday morning started normally with a visit to White Magnolia Bridal for my final dress fitting. I had an appointment at 10 o'clock to pick up my gown after Mrs. Henderson completed the last-minute alterations. Walking into the boutique that had become like a second home over the past months, I expected to see my beautiful dress waiting in its protective bag ready for Saturday's ceremony. Instead, Mrs. Henderson met me at the front desk with an expression of nervous confusion that immediately set alarm bells ringing in my mind. "Miss Margaret, I'm so sorry, but there's been some confusion about your dress," she began, wringing her hands anxiously. "Your sister came in yesterday afternoon with a note that appeared to be from you requesting that we release the dress for emergency alterations at another location." My heart stopped beating for several seconds as her words sank in. "What note? I never sent any note. Where is my dress?" I managed to ask, though my voice sounded strange and distant, even to my own ears. Mrs. Henderson hurried to retrieve a handwritten piece of paper from behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she handed it to me. The note was written in handwriting that resembled mine but felt somehow wrong, like someone had practiced copying my style. It read, "Please release my wedding dress to my sister Rebecca for urgent alterations needed before Saturday. Thank you, Margaret." The signature looked close to mine but lacked the natural flow of my actual handwriting. "She seemed to know all the details about the dress and the wedding," Mrs. Henderson explained apologetically. "She mentioned the vintage lace, the 1965 origin, and even knew about the minor adjustments we had made to the train length." When I hesitated, she became quite insistent and showed me photos on her phone of herself with you, proving she was indeed your sister. "I thought perhaps there was a family emergency or last-minute change you needed to make." Standing in that bridal boutique, feeling the walls closing in around me, I experienced my first real taste of betrayal. My wedding dress, the centerpiece of my carefully planned day, was gone. Taken by my own sister under false pretenses with a forged note. The violation felt deeper than simple theft, because it came from someone I trusted completely, someone who had shared my excitement and helped me plan details over the past few weeks. I called Rebecca immediately, my fingers shaking as I dialed her number. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice bright and cheerful in a way that now felt calculated and false. "Hi, Maggie. How's your morning going? Are you getting excited for Saturday?" "Rebecca, where is my wedding dress?" I asked directly, skipping any pleasantries. There was a pause that lasted several heartbeats too long before she responded. "Your wedding dress. What do you mean? Isn't it at the bridal shop?" Her voice had shifted slightly, becoming higher and more defensive. "Mrs. Henderson says you picked it up yesterday with a note claiming it was from me." "I never wrote any note, Rebecca. Where is my dress? Oh my gosh, Maggie, I have no idea what you're talking about, Rebecca said, but I could hear the nervousness creeping into her tone. Maybe there was some kind of mix-up. I was shopping downtown yesterday, but I never went to any bridal shop. Maybe someone else picked it up. Maybe there was a mistake with the paperwork. Her denials felt hollow and unconvincing, especially since Mrs. Henderson had specifically identified her and mentioned the family photos Rebecca had shown as proof of identity. I hung up the phone feeling sick to my stomach and drove directly to my parents' house, hoping to find answers, or at least my missing dress. When I arrived at my childhood home, I found Rebecca and my mother Eleanor sitting in the sunroom, their heads bent together over what appeared to be bridal magazines. Their conversation stopped abruptly when I walked in, and both women looked up with expressions that seemed artificially bright and welcoming. "Darling, you look upset," my mother said, rising from her chair with concern. "What's wrong? Is everything all right with the wedding preparations?" I explained the situation with my missing dress, watching both women's faces carefully for any signs of deception. My mother appeared genuinely shocked and confused, immediately offering to call Mrs. Henderson herself to clarify the situation. Rebecca, however, seemed nervous and kept avoiding direct eye contact, fidgeting with the magazine pages and offering explanations that felt rehearsed. That evening, exhaustion and stress drove me to check into the historic Union Station Hotel downtown, where David and I had reserved the bridal suite for our wedding night. I needed space to think clearly and prepare for what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. The hotel's grand architecture and luxurious accommodations, which had previously filled me with excitement, now felt like a beautiful backdrop for an increasingly surreal nightmare. Around 10 o'clock that night, as I was trying to calm my nerves with room service and a warm bath, I heard voices coming from the room next door. The walls in the historic building were thinner than modern hotels, and I could clearly make out a conversation taking place in what I realized must be David's room. He had mentioned staying at the hotel that night as well, following the tradition of not seeing the bride before the wedding. What I heard through those walls destroyed every remaining piece of trust I had in the two people I loved most in the world. Rebecca's voice came through clearly tearful and emotional. "I can't go through with this, David. I love you so much, but this is wrong. She's my sister, and I'm about to ruin her life." David's response made my blood run cold. "I know this is crazy, Rebecca, but I can't deny these feelings anymore. Maybe this is meant to be. Maybe we're fighting fate by trying to ignore what's between us." I pressed my ear against the wall, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid I might miss crucial details. Rebecca continued, "But what about Saturday? What about all the guests, the planning, the money? What about Maggie's heart? She loves you so much, David." "I've been thinking about that," David replied, his voice heavy with what sounded like genuine conflict. "Maybe we should wait until after the wedding to figure this out. Give me some time to process these feelings and decide what's right." Rebecca's voice became more urgent. "No, David. That's not fair to any of us. If you really love me, if this is real, then we can't let Maggie marry you while your heart belongs to someone else. That would be cruel beyond measure." Their conversation continued for another 20 minutes, revealing the depth of their emotional affair and their plans to confront me before the wedding. They discussed how they had been fighting their attraction for weeks, how guilty they felt about their feelings, and how they believed true love justified the pain they were about to cause me. David admitted that his distraction and nervousness over the past week had been due to his confusion about his feelings for Rebecca. Sitting on that hotel room floor with my back against the wall, listening to my fiancé and sister plan to destroy my life in the name of love, I experienced a depth of betrayal that I hadn't known was possible. The physical sensation was overwhelming nausea, trembling hands, a crushing weight on my chest that made breathing difficult. Every memory of the past few weeks replayed in my mind with new clarity, revealing signs I had missed or dismissed. At midnight, I decided to confront David directly, rather than pretend I hadn't overheard their conversation. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, his face immediately showed guilt and resignation. He knew from my expression that I had heard everything. "Maggie, I'm so sorry," he began, but I held up my hand to stop him. Just tell me the truth, David. Do you love her?" He ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture I had once found endearing, but now saw as a sign of his weakness and indecision. "I don't know how it happened, Maggie. Rebecca and I started talking more when she came home, and these feelings just developed. I never meant for this to happen, but I can't marry you when I'm having these thoughts about your sister." The honesty, while painful, was at least direct. David explained that he had been planning to talk to me the next morning, hoping to postpone the wedding while he sorted through his emotions. He claimed he didn't want to hurt me, but felt that marrying me while questioning his feelings would be worse than calling off the wedding. Standing in that hotel hallway at 12:30 in the morning, still wearing my rehearsal dinner outfit from earlier that evening, I realized that my fairy tale romance had been built on foundations that crumbled the moment they were tested. David's love for me had been real, but apparently not strong enough to withstand a few weeks of temptation from my charismatic sister. Instead of falling apart completely, something unexpected happened as I processed the full scope of David and Rebecca's betrayal. My professional instincts as a wedding planner kicked in, and I began analyzing the situation with the same strategic thinking I used to solve complex event coordination problems. Rather than react emotionally and give them exactly what they expected, I decided to respond with careful planning and flawless execution. Sitting in my hotel room at 2 in the morning, still reeling from David's confession, I realized that Rebecca and David were counting on me to cancel the wedding in heartbreak and humiliation. They expected tears, drama, and a clear path for them to begin their relationship publicly, without having to face the social consequences of breaking up an engagement just days before the ceremony. Their plan relied on my emotional devastation and public embarrassment. But I had spent years solving impossible wedding crises, from natural disasters to vendor bankruptcies to family emergencies. My reputation was built on finding creative solutions when everything seemed hopeless. As I sat there in the elegant hotel suite, surrounded by the luxury that was supposed to celebrate my marriage to David, a plan began forming that would give Rebecca and David exactly what they thought they wanted while ensuring I maintained my dignity and power in the situation. My first call was to Jonathan Clark, David's best man and longtime friend. Jonathan had been quietly supportive throughout my relationship with David, and I had always sensed that his friendship toward me contained deeper feelings he never expressed out of loyalty to David. Jonathan was a pediatric surgeon at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, known for his integrity, kindness, and unwavering moral compass. If anyone would help me execute a plan that required both secrecy and absolute trustworthiness, it would be Jonathan. "Maggie, is everything okay? It's 2 in the morning." Jonathan answered, his voice immediately alert with concern. "Jonathan, I need your help with something that's going to sound completely insane, but I promise I'm thinking clearly." I began, then explained the entire situation: Rebecca's theft of my dress, the overheard conversation, David's confession, and their plan to humiliate me publicly. There was a long silence before Jonathan responded, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with anger I had never heard from him before. "That son of a... I'm sorry, Maggie. I can't believe David would do this to you. And your own sister. This is unconscionable." "Jonathan, I want to ask you something that might sound crazy, but I need you to hear me out completely before you respond," I continued. "I want us to get legally married tomorrow morning before the ceremony. Let Rebecca and David think they've won, let them have their moment of public triumph, and then I'll reveal that we're already married." The silence stretched longer this time as Jonathan processed my proposal. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful and thoughtful. "Maggie, I need to be completely honest with you. I've had feelings for you since the day David introduced us, but I never said anything because you were happy with him and he was my friend. If we do this, I want you to know that for me, it won't just be strategy or revenge. I've imagined being married to you more times than I can count." His honesty touched something deep in my heart that I hadn't expected. "Jonathan, I can't promise you what this will become, but I can promise you that I value your friendship and your character more than I ever valued David's charm. Right now, I need someone I can trust completely, and you're the only person in my life who fits that description." We talked until 4 in the morning, working out every detail of our plan. Jonathan would arrange for a marriage license first thing Friday morning, using his connections to expedite the normally longer process. I would contact Judge Margaret Williams, a family friend who had officiated several weddings I had planned to perform a private ceremony. We would marry at sunrise in Centennial Park, document everything with photographs, and then attend the afternoon ceremony as legally married guests watching my sister make a fool of herself. The plan required perfect timing and absolute secrecy. Jonathan would tell David he was spending Friday morning handling last-minute best man duties, while I would claim to be at the spa preparing for my wedding day. We would meet at the park at 6 in the morning with Judge Williams exchange vows and rings take photos as evidence of our marriage, and then return to our respective preparations for the afternoon drama. As dawn broke over Nashville Friday morning, I realized I felt calmer and more centered than I had in weeks. The crushing weight of betrayal was still there, but it was balanced by anticipation and a strange sense of righteous justice. I was about to turn Rebecca and David's betrayal into their own public humiliation, while securing my own dignity and future happiness. Judge Williams arrived at Centennial Park at exactly 6 o'clock, carrying her official documentation and wearing a kind smile that had comforted dozens of nervous couples over her 20-year career. Margaret Williams had been a family friend since my childhood and had always been impressed by my work ethic and integrity. When I called her Thursday night to explain the situation and request her help, she immediately agreed, saying that sometimes unconventional problems required unconventional solutions. Jonathan arrived 5 minutes later, wearing a simple navy suit and carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked from his own garden that morning. He looked nervous but determined, and when he handed me the flowers, his hands were steady and warm. "These aren't as elegant as the arrangements you planned for this afternoon, but they're honest," he said softly. Standing in that beautiful park as the sun rose over Nashville with the Cumberland River flowing peacefully in the distance, and the city skyline providing a stunning backdrop, I experienced a moment of unexpected clarity. This quiet, honest ceremony felt more meaningful than all the elaborate planning and expensive details I had arranged for the afternoon event. There was something pure about choosing love and commitment in such a simple, authentic setting. Judge Williams performed a brief but heartfelt ceremony, speaking about the importance of trust, friendship, and choosing partners who support our growth rather than exploit our vulnerabilities. Jonathan's vows were impromptu but deeply moving, speaking about how he had watched me handle challenges with grace and strength, and how he promised to be worthy of my trust and partnership, regardless of how our relationship evolved. My own vows surprised me with their honesty and emotion. I spoke about learning the difference between love that asks us to compromise our values and love that strengthens our character. I promised Jonathan that while this marriage began as strategy, I was committed to approaching it with the same integrity and openness I brought to everything else in my life. We exchanged simple gold bands that Jonathan had purchased that morning, and Judge Williams pronounced us legally married as the sun painted the Nashville sky in shades of pink and gold. The photographer I had discreetly hired captured every moment, creating a visual record that would serve as evidence of our legal union and unexpectedly as beautiful memories of an authentic moment of connection and commitment. Saturday afternoon arrived with perfect June weather, exactly as I had planned months earlier, when I believed I would be marrying David in front of 200 guests at Belle Meade Plantation. Instead, I arrived at my own scheduled wedding as a guest wearing an elegant navy blue dress with pearl accessories and my new wedding ring discreetly positioned to look like regular jewelry. Jonathan and I had agreed to sit separately during the ceremony to avoid drawing attention before the dramatic revelation we had planned. The plantation looked absolutely magnificent, with every detail executed exactly as I had originally envisioned. White roses and peonies created stunning arrangements throughout the ceremony. Space string lights twinkled in the ancient oak trees, and the historic mansion provided a breathtaking backdrop for what was supposed to be my fairy tale wedding. Seeing my carefully planned vision come to life for someone else's betrayal felt surreal, but I maintained my composure and took my seat in the third row with other family members. Guests were clearly confused as they arrived and noticed me sitting calmly in the audience rather than preparing in the bridal suite. Many approached with concerned questions about why I wasn't getting ready, but I simply smiled and said there had been some changes to the day's schedule that would be explained during the ceremony. The whispered conversations and puzzled glances created an undercurrent of tension that built throughout the pre-ceremony period. My mother Eleanor appeared increasingly frantic as the ceremony time approached, clearly knowing more about the situation than she was comfortable admitting publicly. She kept glancing between me and the bridal suite, where Rebecca was presumably preparing to make her entrance in my stolen dress. Several times, Mother approached my seat with obvious intentions of discussing the situation, but I politely deflected her attempts and suggested she focus on her hostess duties. At exactly 4 o'clock, the string quartet began playing the processional music I had selected months earlier. The irony of hearing my carefully chosen songs accompany my sister's betrayal was not lost on me, but I maintained my serene expression and watched as the wedding party made their entrance. David's groomsmen looked confused and uncomfortable, clearly uncertain about the unusual circumstances they were participating in. David appeared at the altar, wearing the charcoal gray tuxedo we had selected together, but his face showed none of the joy typically associated with grooms on their wedding day. Instead, he looked pale, nervous, and kept glancing toward my seat in the audience with an expression that seemed to mix guilt, confusion, and something that might have been regret. Reverend Thomas, who had been scheduled to officiate my wedding, looked equally perplexed by the irregular situation he found himself managing. Then Rebecca made her entrance, and the entire gathering gasped audibly as she appeared in my stolen vintage lace wedding dress. The gown looked exactly as beautiful on her as it had during our fitting sessions, the intricate lace details catching the afternoon sunlight and the flowing train creating an elegant silhouette as she walked down the aisle. But instead of joy or celebration, her appearance in my dress created an atmosphere of shock and discomfort among the guests. Rebecca walked slowly down the aisle, clearly savoring the attention and drama of the moment. She had styled her hair in an elaborate updo, similar to what I had planned for myself, and she carried the bouquet of white roses and peonies that had been created for my hands. The visual impact was stunning, but the emotional impact on the gathered guests was one of confusion and growing disapproval as they realized what was happening. When Rebecca reached the altar, she turned to face the audience rather than immediately joining David for the ceremony. Her voice carried clearly across the plantation grounds as she made her announcement. "I know this seems shocking and unexpected, but I need everyone to understand what's really happening here today. David and I have fallen deeply in love, and we cannot deny our hearts any longer." The gasps and murmurs from the guests grew louder as Rebecca continued her dramatic speech. "Love doesn't follow the schedules we make or the plans we create. True love is powerful enough to overcome any obstacle, including family expectations and social conventions. David belongs with me and I belong with him. He's mine now, and nothing can change that." David stood beside her, looking increasingly uncomfortable as Rebecca's declaration continued, but he made no effort to stop her or correct her statements. Several guests began looking around in confusion, searching for my reaction to this unprecedented situation. Some family members appeared genuinely shocked, while others seemed to have suspected something was developing between Rebecca and David. Reverend Thomas cleared his throat nervously and attempted to restore some semblance of normal ceremony proceedings. "Well, this is certainly an unusual situation," he said diplomatically. "Before we continue, I think we need to address the concerns of all family members involved in this change of plans." Rebecca turned toward my section of the audience with a triumphant smile that felt calculated and cruel. "Maggie understands that true love cannot be stopped or delayed. She's stepping aside like the good sister she's always been, allowing happiness to flourish where it belongs. She knows that David and I are meant to be together." The entire gathering turned to stare at me, expecting tears drama, or some kind of emotional breakdown that would provide appropriate entertainment for this bizarre situation. Many guests looked sympathetic, clearly feeling sorry for what they assumed was my public humiliation and heartbreak. Others appeared uncomfortable witnessing what seemed like a family crisis playing out in such a public setting. Instead of providing the dramatic reaction Rebecca and David were expecting, I stood up calmly and smoothed my navy dress. I walked to the front of the gathered guests with the same composed confidence I had demonstrated during hundreds of professional wedding crises. When I reached the area near the altar, I turned to face the audience and smiled warmly at the confused and concerned faces staring back at me. Thank you all for being here today to witness this interesting performance. I began, my voice carrying clearly across the plantation grounds. I want to assure everyone that there's no need for concern or sympathy on my behalf. This situation has actually worked out perfectly for everyone involved. I pulled out my phone and displayed the photos from my morning wedding ceremony, holding them high enough for nearby guests to see clearly. I'd like everyone to meet my husband, Dr. Jonathan Clark, and to see pictures from our wedding ceremony, which took place this morning at sunrise in Centennial Park. Judge Margaret Williams officiated our legal marriage at 6 o'clock this morning. The silence that followed was absolute and profound. Rebecca's face went completely white as she processed what I had just revealed, and David's expression shifted from guilt to shock to what appeared to be anger at being outmaneuvered so completely. The guests began buzzing with excitement and amazement, clearly impressed by the unexpected turn of events. The aftermath of my revelation created a scene more dramatic than anything I could have choreographed as a professional wedding planner. Rebecca stood frozen at the altar in my stolen dress, her face cycling through expressions of shock, disbelief, and growing panic as she realized her moment of triumph had been transformed into public humiliation. The vintage lace gown that had looked so elegant moments before now seemed like a costume from a poorly planned theatrical performance. David's reaction was equally satisfying to witness. His face flushed red with embarrassment and what appeared to be anger at being so thoroughly outmaneuvered. He had expected to face a heartbroken, devastated ex-fiancé, not a woman who had anticipated his betrayal and responded with superior strategy. The realization that I had been several steps ahead of their plan clearly troubled his ego more than he had anticipated. "That's impossible," Rebecca stammered, her voice cracking with emotion. "You can't just get married without telling anyone. That doesn't count as a real wedding. This morning was just some kind of joke or mistake." I smiled patiently and held up my phone again, scrolling through more photos from the morning ceremony. "I assure you, Rebecca, our marriage is completely legal and properly documented. Judge Williams filed all the necessary paperwork with Davidson County this morning. Jonathan and I are legally married as of 6:15 this morning." Judge Williams, who had remained at the plantation as my invited guest, stood up in the audience and confirmed my statement. "I can verify that I performed a legal marriage ceremony this morning between Margaret and Dr. Clark. All documentation has been properly filed with the appropriate authorities." The guests erupted in applause and amazed laughter, clearly appreciating the poetic justice of the situation. Many people began approaching me with congratulations and expressions of admiration for how I had handled such a difficult betrayal. David's family members looked embarrassed and began quietly making their way toward the exits, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the public spectacle their son had created. Rebecca tried desperately to salvage some dignity from the situation. "This is ridiculous, Maggie. You can't just marry someone you don't love out of spite. This whole thing is a sham and everyone can see that. You're just trying to humiliate David and me because you're jealous and bitter." "Actually, Rebecca," I replied calmly, "I'm grateful to you and David for showing me who you really are before I made the mistake of legally binding myself to someone with so little integrity. Jonathan and I have been friends for 2 years, and this morning's ceremony was based on mutual respect, honesty, and genuine affection. Qualities that were apparently missing from my previous relationship." Jonathan approached from his seat in the audience, looking handsome and confident, as he joined me at the front of the gathering. He slipped his arm around my waist in a gesture that felt natural and protective, and when he smiled at me, the warmth in his eyes was genuine and reassuring. "I want everyone to know that marrying Maggie this morning was the greatest honor of my life," Jonathan announced to the gathered guests. I've admired her strength, intelligence, and integrity for years, and I'm grateful that circumstances finally brought us together as husband and wife. His words felt sincere and touching, and I realized that what had begun as a strategic alliance was already developing into something deeper and more meaningful. Jonathan's steady presence and unwavering support during this crisis had revealed qualities I had never fully appreciated when I was focused on David's more superficial charm. Reverend Thomas, clearly relieved to have some clarity about the situation, approached David and Rebecca with diplomatic professionalism. Given these developments, I assume this ceremony will not be continuing as originally planned. Perhaps it would be best for everyone involved to take some time to process these revelations privately. David finally found his voice, though it came out strained and defensive. "Maggie, this is insane. You married Jonathan just to spite me. That's not love. That's revenge, and it's going to ruin both of your lives. You'll regret this impulsive decision when you realize what you've done." "David," I replied evenly, "the only thing I regret is not recognizing your true character sooner. Jonathan has shown me more respect and loyalty in one morning than you demonstrated during our entire relationship. I wish you and Rebecca happiness together, though I suspect you'll discover that relationships built on betrayal rarely have strong foundations." The crowd began dispersing as it became clear that no traditional ceremony would be taking place. Many guests approached Jonathan and me with congratulations and invitations to celebrate our unexpected marriage properly. Several people commented on how much happier and more relaxed I appeared compared to recent weeks, when they now realized I must have been sensing the problems in my relationship with David. My mother, Eleanor, finally approached, looking mortified and apologetic. "Margaret, darling, I had no idea this was Rebecca's plan. I knew she had feelings for David, but I never imagined she would go this far. I'm so sorry I didn't warn you about what I suspected was developing." Her admission confirmed my suspicions that she had been aware of Rebecca's intentions, but had chosen not to protect me from the betrayal. While I appreciated her apology, I realized that my mother's approval-seeking nature and favoritism toward Rebecca had contributed to this situation in ways that would require future conversations and boundary setting. Rebecca made one final attempt to justify her actions as guests continued leaving the plantation. "Maggie, you have to understand that David and I didn't plan for this to happen. We fell in love despite ourselves, and love like that can't be ignored or suppressed. We were trying to find a way to tell you that wouldn't hurt you so much." "Rebecca," I replied with finality. Stealing my wedding dress and planning to humiliate me publicly was not an attempt to protect my feelings. It was a calculated decision to prioritize your own desires over our family relationship. I hope you and David find happiness together, but I will not be participating in your narrative that this betrayal was somehow romantic or inevitable. As the plantation grounds emptied of confused and departing guests, Jonathan and I remained behind to collect my personal items and speak with the vendors about the situation. Most of the professional staff were remarkably understanding, especially when they learned I was a respected wedding planner myself who had been placed in an impossible situation through no fault of my own. The string quartet offered to play a few songs for Jonathan and me as an impromptu reception, and we accepted their generous offer. Dancing with my new husband in the same location where I had planned to celebrate my marriage to David felt like a perfect symbol of transformation and new beginnings. The music was beautiful, the setting was elegant, and the man holding me was honorable and trustworthy in ways I was only beginning to fully appreciate. The weeks and months following what became known in Nashville social circles as the plantation wedding scandal brought unexpected healing growth and genuine happiness into my life in ways I never could have anticipated when I was planning my original fairy tale ceremony. The immediate aftermath was challenging, as family relationships required rebuilding and my professional reputation needed protection, but the long-term consequences exceeded my most optimistic expectations. Jonathan and I spent our first weeks as a married couple getting to know each other in entirely new ways, while navigating the practical and emotional complexities of our unusual beginning. We agreed to approach our marriage with complete honesty about our feelings, expectations, and concerns, creating a foundation of communication that felt refreshing after months of sensing deception and hidden agendas in my relationship with David. Our first real conversation as husband and wife took place in my apartment Sunday morning after the plantation drama over coffee and grocery store bagels that felt more satisfying than any elaborate brunch could have been. Jonathan admitted that while he had agreed to marry me primarily to help with my revenge plan, his feelings for me had been genuine for years, and he was hopeful our partnership could develop into something authentic and lasting. I shared my own confusion about suddenly being married to someone I had considered primarily a friend, but acknowledged that the respect and trust I felt for Jonathan was stronger than the passion I had thought I felt for David. We agreed to take our relationship day by day, allowing genuine feelings to develop naturally without pressure or artificial timelines. The practical aspects of our new marriage required careful navigation, since we had not planned to combine our lives so quickly. Jonathan's apartment near Vanderbilt Medical Center was closer to his work, while my place downtown was better for my business operations. We decided to maintain both residences temporarily, while slowly integrating our belongings and routines, giving ourselves time to adjust to shared decision-making and domestic partnership. My wedding planning business experienced an unexpected surge of interest following the plantation incident. Rather than damaging my professional reputation, the story of how I had handled such a personal crisis with grace and strategic thinking actually attracted new clients who were impressed by my problem-solving abilities and unflappable demeanor under pressure. Several high-profile Nashville families specifically requested my services, mentioning that they wanted a wedding planner who could handle any crisis with intelligence and dignity. The story spread through social media and local news outlets, with most coverage focusing on the positive aspects of how I had turned betrayal into empowerment. Wedding industry colleagues reached out with support and admiration, sharing their own stories of family drama and vendor crises they had managed over the years. My business phone rang constantly with interview requests, potential clients, and other wedding planners wanting advice about handling similar situations. Rebecca and David's relationship lasted exactly 3 months and 2 weeks after the plantation incident, crumbling under the weight of guilt, social disapproval, and the reality that their connection had been built primarily on the excitement of forbidden attraction rather than genuine compatibility. The intense drama that had brought them together proved insufficient to sustain a real relationship once the initial thrill faded, and they faced the practical challenges of building a life together. David attempted to contact me several times during the months following our breakup, initially through angry text messages claiming I had ruined his reputation, and later through apologetic calls suggesting we might be able to reconcile our friendship. I blocked his number after the third attempt, realizing that any continued communication would be unhealthy for my marriage and my own emotional healing process. Rebecca's attempts at reconciliation were more persistent and emotionally manipulative. She sent long letters describing her regret and loneliness, claiming that her actions had been driven by genuine love and confusion rather than malicious intent. She blamed our mother's favoritism and her own insecurities for her poor decisions, asking for forgiveness and suggesting that families should be able to overcome any conflict with enough time and effort. While I eventually responded to Rebecca's outreach with forgiveness, I was clear that rebuilding trust would require significant time and consistent evidence of changed behavior. I explained that forgiveness did not mean immediate restoration of our previous relationship or pretending that her choices had not caused lasting damage to our family dynamics. We began with occasional phone calls and brief coffee meetings, slowly working toward a healthier sister relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition. My mother, Eleanor, struggled more than anyone with the aftermath of the plantation incident, primarily because her social circle spent months discussing and analyzing every detail of what had happened. She eventually admitted that she had suspected Rebecca's feelings for David, but had hoped the situation would resolve itself without intervention. Her tendency to avoid conflict and her favoritism toward Rebecca had prevented her from protecting me from predictable betrayal. Eleanor and I attended several family therapy sessions together, working through decades of family dynamics that had contributed to the wedding crisis. She began recognizing how her approval-seeking behavior and tendency to treat her daughters differently had created unhealthy competition between Rebecca and me. While our relationship required ongoing work, these conversations helped establish better boundaries and more honest communication patterns. The most surprising development was how genuinely happy Jonathan and I became as our marriage evolved from strategic alliance into authentic partnership. Our shared values, compatible life goals, and mutual respect created a foundation for love that felt more stable and satisfying than the intense passion I had experienced with David. Jonathan's medical career complemented my wedding planning business perfectly, as we both understood the importance of service to others and attention to detail in high-pressure situations. 6 months after our sunrise wedding, Jonathan and I planned a second ceremony to celebrate our marriage with family and friends who wanted to witness our commitment in a more traditional setting. This celebration was smaller and more intimate than my original wedding plans, focusing on meaningful relationships rather than social obligations. We exchanged new vows that reflected our genuine feelings and experiences as a married couple, creating memories that belonged entirely to us. The second ceremony took place at Cheekwood Estate, the same location where Jonathan and I had first worked together planning his sister Jennifer's wedding. The symbolism of returning to where our friendship had deepened felt perfect for celebrating how far we had traveled together. Our vows spoke about choosing love daily, supporting each other's growth, and building a partnership based on trust and shared values, rather than just emotional attraction. 1 year after the plantation incident, Jonathan and I were featured in a Nashville lifestyle magazine article about unconventional love stories and second chances. The interview focused on how crisis can reveal character and create opportunities for unexpected happiness when we remain open to new possibilities. We discussed the importance of choosing partners based on integrity and compatibility rather than just chemistry or social expectations. The most profound lesson I learned through this entire experience was the difference between reacting and responding when faced with betrayal and crisis. My initial instinct had been to react emotionally, to cry and rage, and demand explanations from people who had already demonstrated their untrustworthiness. Instead, I chose to respond strategically, maintaining my dignity, while ensuring that consequences fell on the people who had made selfish choices rather than on their innocent victim. This distinction between reacting and responding became a central principle in how I approached both my personal relationships and my professional challenges. When vendor crises arose, or family dramas threatened to disrupt carefully planned celebrations, I remembered that my response had more power to determine outcomes than whatever initial problem had occurred. This mindset shift improved every area of my life and became something I shared with clients facing their own wedding-related stress and family conflicts. The experience also taught me that sometimes what feels like the worst betrayal can actually be a gift that redirects us toward better opportunities and healthier relationships. If Rebecca and David had not revealed their true characters before my wedding, I might have spent years in a marriage with someone who lacked the integrity and commitment I deserved. Their betrayal, while painful, freed me to find authentic love with someone who chose me consistently and honestly. Jonathan often reminds me that our marriage began with a strategic alliance, but grew into something neither of us had expected or planned. He says that watching me handle crisis with such grace and intelligence made him fall in love with me more deeply than years of casual friendship had accomplished. Our unusual beginning taught us both that real love is built through choosing each other daily, especially during difficult circumstances, rather than just feeling attraction during easy times. Looking back on that surreal Saturday at Belle Meade Plantation, I feel grateful for every moment of drama and revelation that led me away from a life that would have been beautiful on the surface, but empty of authentic connection. Rebecca's betrayal forced me to recognize David's true character and opened my eyes to Jonathan's exceptional qualities that I had been too distracted to fully appreciate. Today, when I plan weddings for other couples, I always remind them that the ceremony is just one day, but the marriage is a lifetime of choosing each other through challenges and changes that cannot be anticipated during the excitement of engagement. I share my story when appropriate, helping couples understand that the most important qualities in a partner are integrity, loyalty, and genuine friendship, rather than just romantic chemistry or social compatibility. The question I want to leave you with today is this: when faced with betrayal or crisis in your own life, will you choose to react with emotion alone, or will you respond with strategy and wisdom that protects your dignity and creates opportunities for better outcomes? Have you ever experienced a situation where what seemed like the worst thing that could happen actually redirected you towards something better than what you had originally planned? I would love to hear your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or taught you something valuable about handling difficult relationships, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about love, betrayal, redemption, and the unexpected ways life can surprise us when we remain open to new possibilities. Share this video with anyone who might need encouragement that crisis can become opportunity when we respond with wisdom rather than just emotion. Thank you for listening to my story with such attention and support. I hope your own love story, whatever challenges it may include, leads you toward authentic happiness and partnerships built on trust, respect, and genuine friendship that can weather any storm life brings your way.